Welcome to Conversations at Studios Inc. My name is Courtney Wasson, and I'm the Executive Director of Studios Inc. Today we'll be talking with Susan White, an artist and sculptor who's in the third year of her residency here at Studios Inc. Studios Inc. is Kansas City's arts nonprofit that offers pivotal 3-year residencies to mid-career artists. Thank you for joining us. Well, Susan, welcome to the desk.
Well, thanks, Courtney. I'm excited to be here.
It's fun. You're our third conversation.
Okay.
And I'm really have been looking forward to this conversation because getting to know you at Studios and all of our talks that we've had here have been interesting and enlightening.
Well, they've been great for me too.
And I'm excited to dig into more of you as an artist and your work.
Okay.
So first, can you tell me about the work you do now?
Sure. The work I've been doing primarily over the past few years is working with thorns from the honey locust tree. And I also historically do make burn drawings, and I consider that sort of a dual kind of work, 2D and 3D, but most predominantly recently I have been working with the thorns. And I think of them as elements in three-dimensional drawings. The thorns grow on the side of the honey locust tree, and they can be really long. They can be as long as 12, 15, 18 inches. And they can also be small, like an inch and a half or something like that. And they're common in Kansas and Missouri, although they're also common in other areas. I was really surprised one time I was in New York walking along Riverside Park up in the Upper West Side, I guess, and I was just I happened to be up there for another reason, and I looked over, and in Riverside Park there was a honey locust tree that had all these thorns growing up and around the trunk. It was really, I took some photographs, and of course they're lost now in my 35,000 photos, but it was really amazing. So they can be found everywhere. I have to say most people really hate them, and they grow in the city and they also grow in the country. There are two kind of varieties. There's one kind that doesn't really have thorns so much. Mm-hmm. They also have bean pods. And then there's another kind that is that has these thorns, and they're really extremely tough. And if you happen to be a farmer or a rancher or something like that, or even a person who has these in your yard, and even you have a large yard on the edge of the city, and they can go through tires, they can go through animals, they can harm animals and certainly children. Yeah. They can go through shoes. I mean, they're very disliked because they're so strong. But I had this really interesting comment that I hadn't known before. I exhibited at the Vollen store in Alma, Kansas a year or two ago, and one of the ranchers around there told me that there's a bird called a shrike, and shrikes, now I want to say they're carnivorous. They must be. I mean, they get little lizards and mice and little animals like that, and they hunt them. And he was telling me that they will find a lizard or a mouse and then stick it on one of these thorns as like a holding place for it to be while they continue hunting or do other things, which was really astounding. I would love to see that sometime, but I haven't. Yeah. But anyway.
Well, so how long have you been working with these thorns?
Gosh, that's a good question. They sort of, let's see. Oh, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I was working with little branches and burning holes in the branches. And I mean, a little bit bigger than a toothpick, like a redbud branch or mm-hmm. something like that, because I've always been really influenced by the sort of quietness of sort of a Japanese aesthetic or an Asian aesthetic that has a really quiet way of making and building and joinery, and and so I had been doing this wood burning, doing these drawings, pyrographs, by burning paper as a way of mark making. And I was using different tools, and I had one tool that was this pencil point tool, and then that's when I started using that tool to burn the hole, and then I was kind of making small constructions with that kind of natural material joinery. And then I had access to some land in Kansas, and I saw these trees, and they were so amazing. And so I started working with the thorns.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how long ago? Oh, I don't know. I don't know,
You
10,
said 10,
15
years?
Yeah, a long time.
Well, is there something about the nature and honoring that and the quietness, but there's also with these thorns the danger.
Yeah, well, there are a couple things that are interesting to me about them. First of all, I've always really liked geometry, and there's a gorgeous sort of natural geometry in the way the thorns work. There are all these metaphors and layers that are interesting to me. There's a natural geometry of the thorn that's really elegant, and I put them together taking advantage of those kind of geometric connections, and so I work with them in that way. So there's that sense. There's the sense that they're like elegant and daunting at the same time. So they have a really beautiful, natural simplicity to the form that's really appealing. But at the same time, they're very daunting. I mean, they can be very dangerous, and they can, I've gotten hurt multiple times, not badly, but some people I think are very allergic to them, and that if you that they can be really problematic. The other layer that is sort of interesting to me is that they also have cultural connotations in terms of a kind of religion, and that's not something that I bring to it in terms of my interest in them, but I like that they have a cultural subtext for some people, and so they have a layer there that that may or may not be relevant to the viewer, depending.
Yeah, and you allow that.
I think that's sort of interesting that it exists in a certain way.
Well, I think it's important too to talk about you build and create these structures with the actual thorns, which are almost like a hardwood.
Right.
They're strong. But then you also create bronze sculptures.
I do.
From the thorns.
I do.
I'd like to hear more about that process and what inspired that.
Sure. Well, so that was really interesting because for a long time I haven't worked with bronze. I haven't done bronze thorns because I kind of rejected it because I sort of felt like I really was interested in the natural material. I was interested in the more ephemeral quality of the thorns, and then there's a place in Kansas City, Allegis Bronze, and it's been very helpful. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to take some of these thorns over there, and they can just kind of play with them and see what happens. And so I worked with Allegis, and they experimented with them, and they would just kind of tuck a thorn in here and there and just kind of see what happened. And at first it was really hard to figure out their way to make them work because they would get an air pocket at the end, and I couldn't get that really nice tip, and I wasn't sure this was going to be relevant. And then they kept working. I had one guy especially that I worked with, and he kept working with it, and he got these really gorgeous points. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll kind of try that. And I think I had an exhibition at the Dawn Museum, and I think it was right before that I got an inspiration grant. And I was able to use some of the money from the inspiration grant to go ahead and cast some of these thorns and to make them into a sculpture. Well, the thing that was interesting, there were a couple of things that were interesting about that. One is the way that I put the thorns together, the natural ones, is that I burn a hole and then they're self-doweled, so it's a way of like, and the burning process itself is very quiet, and sometimes there's a little plume of smoke that'll rise up. So when I had these bronze thorns, I thought, well, how am I going to put these together? Like, what do I do with this? Well, it happens that our family has a drill press that was my husband's grandfather's. So it's this really old drill press, and I started thinking, well, maybe I could use that drill press. So I did. I started using this drill press, which I liked that it had a degree of history and cultural connotation that came with even the way of making the hole in the bronze. And so that's how I started drilling a hole, and then they were self-doweled in the same way that the natural ones were. And then they are either soldered or welded in a with a light touch in certain sections to keep them together. But the thing about the bronze that I found interesting was that it was more organic than I recognized. In terms of working with it was a softer metal, and I don't want to say it has malleability, but it has a life to it that you can work with in a certain way. And the patina, the natural patina, the I've been experimenting with painting and with oil paint in some of the bronze thorns, and that's been really interesting.
Well, in some of the pieces you showed me, even, is it called the flux that comes
Yeah.
out
Oh,
onto
yeah.
the thorn? Almost looks like, I
like
hope I'm saying like lichen.
Yes, that's
And-
right. Because
and
the
it-
lich has been so interesting to me. That's right. And so there's a natural if the way the thorn is cast, if there's a crack in the it's called flashing. If there's a little crack in the I can't think of the word that means that casing, the ceramic shell. If there's a little crack and the bronze slips out of a crack, then there's a little bit of a lacy edge that'll come out. And what normally you would do is chase it away, which means like clean it up and get rid of that. But I've started keeping that little edge on some cases because it does the natural thorns often have a lichen that grows on them, and it's so gorgeous, and it's rock-like. I didn't know this so much about lichen, but if you get it wet, it gets soft and mossy. But if it hardens and is dry, it's like a rock. It's like rock-like, and I also understand that it's the relationship between the thorn and the lichen is symbiotic. It's not parasitic, so the lichen doesn't damage the thorn. And then also, Courtney, there's one other thing I might say. In terms of casting the thorns in bronze, that's an interesting process, because what I do is I take the thorns. They're kind of like 3 generations. They're these really young ones when they grow on the side of the tree, and they're kind of a green color. Then the more adult are kind of a beautiful mahogany. They're just a really beautiful kind of hard mahogany color, and then as they get old, they get kind of gray and dry, and they don't really fall off, but if something causes them to go off, that you'll find those on the ground. But they're quite dry. So those are the ones that I take to the foundry, and what they do is they do an organic burnout. So I would take maybe 10 thorns, and they would dip each thorn in ceramic shell, maybe 8 or 9 times. And before doing that, of course, they build these little gates and vents so that the bronze can flow through. But at the end of each one of the points, there's a little vent. And so that's what lets the bronze go all the way down, and then lets the air escape, and then that can be knocked off at the very end. But what that means is that each thorn is unique.
Right.
So I don't have like a mold that I make 15 thorns that are the same shape.
Right. And it's a collaborative process. So
Yeah.
you're working with the foundry or
Yeah.
I don't know, the man that runs the foundry.
Yeah.
Is he a founder?
Sounds like he should be.
He should
I
be
don't know.
But then-
I refer to him as the foundry guy.
Yeah, the foundry guy.
Yeah.
Well, and then in your studio, when you're endeavoring on these big sculptures, you also have people that come in and help you,
Yeah.
assistants in your studio.
Yeah.
And what's that process like, and how do you manage that?
Yeah. Oh, I just have had such wonderful helpers. And for really a year at one point, I had Hattie Odell was an assistant of mine, and she's just so extremely helpful. I always was very hesitant to ask a studio assistant to burn and make these sections, because I take the natural thorns and I burn the hole and I make sections that are connected, and then I can use I can drill a hole in the wall, place a single thorn in that hole, do that again next to it, and then place sections on those, so they sort of hook over them, and in that manner I can create a large piece, like a wall drawing or something, like similar to what was at the Nerman and what was at the Dawn Museum.
And when you say wall drawing, when you install these, sometimes they just stick literally into the wall.
Well, that's what I'm saying. At one point I was using like a long skewer, like a wooden skewer. I drill a hole at a diagonal, like a 45-degree angle, put the skewer in, and then rest a thorn section over that, and then do another one, and they would connect in that way. But a far better way, I still drill the hole at the 45-degree angle, but I take a single thorn that I've painted, or that I've, either you painted, I think would be the right thing, but I've also done this with bronze. I take a single thorn that has multiple facets, so it's going to have multiple things, and then I kind of wedge that into the hole so that it sticks, and some of the arms of the thorn often are like holding onto the wall, so that it kind of clamps onto the wall, and then I rest the thorn sections on those, and they wind up interlocking in a stronger and more organic way.
Well, and when we're talking about this, not everybody that's listening will know, but you'll see pictures. They're not small scale. These sculptures that you make are quite large.
Yeah, they are. My piece. Let's see. The piece at the Dawn Museum, I want to say it was about. It's on my website and I can't remember, but I want to say 15 or 20 feet wide and maybe 8 feet tall, and it was above the viewer's head. The piece at the Nerman was, it stretched across 2 walls, and it was maybe approaching 37 to 40 feet, because it went through a corner.
And then you have the pieces that are suspended.
Yeah, and then the suspended, which is, the flag is 11 by 7. But before we go, I want to go back to my comment I was going to say about Hattie and the assistants that have been so helpful. So I've been always reticent to ask someone who's working with me to make these thorn sections, because you wind up, it's not that the thorns hurt your fingers, it's that this little pencil point burning tool sometimes crashes into your finger, and that's what hurts. That's the bigger problem. But because I'd worked with Hattie for quite a while, she's very good at making the sections as well, which is really helpful. And then other people have been so helpful in terms of helping me install in the studio and painting thorns, and then I have a wonderful way of working with these large pieces that are suspended, like the flag. Right. And those I work with Nick over at Dick Job, Nick Kearns, who's wonderful and makes these chain links for me that are the infrastructure.
Nick's and Dick are with Machine Head.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and when you talk about the flag, that's easy for someone to visualize an American flag as red, white, and blue.
Right.
But before you did the flag, you did the piece that was at the Crossroads Gallery, correct?
Yes.
Red and blue initially first.
Right.
So what
and before that, I had 2 flags. I had actually 3 other flags.
Okay. So then the flag was the first iteration, and then it came to these bigger red and blue, kind
more of a landscape
into,
almost.
Each other. What was that? What inspired you to do those?
To make the first flag? Well, the first flag was, I was working with an artist named Jung-Ah. Yeah. And she was from Korea. Okay. She was teaching at the Art Institute, and she had dual citizenship. She was an American citizen and a South Korean. So the first flag, I was working with Jung-Ah, and we decided to do an exhibition together at a gallery that was called Carrie Cabeza, which was on Holmes. And it was really the exhibition was called I Am an American, and it was in 2012, and it was during the time, American politics has been contentious for a while, but that was when it was getting really contentious. That's when Obama was president, and there was a lot of discord, and it was really it was just a very contentious political time. And so Jung Ah had a really interesting piece in which she was very attuned to immigration and information about immigration. So she had an opportunity to contact with maybe 20 different immigrants from different countries, and she had them all sing the American Star Spangled Banner in their own language, and then had video monitors, and that was part of an installation. That was the thing in the space, and it was really very moving. It was really a great piece. And so this gallery was long and narrow. The monitors were at one end, and at the other end, the singers on the monitors were facing an American flag, and that was my first American flag. And it was wall size, so let's see, it was approximately 7.5 by 12 feet, and it was attached to the wall, and it was made of thorns, honey locust thorns. They're red, white, and blue, and it was the first flag, and it was really interesting in a certain way. It had a lace-like quality to it, so it felt fragile at the same time that it was large and imposing, at the same time that the thorns themselves carried meaning in their sense of elegance and danger in a certain way. And that was the first time that a viewer said to me something about this flag brought up to them questions in terms of separation of church and state, which was really interesting to me, because I don't know that consciously I had that on my mind, but I am always concerned about issues related to church and state. And anyway, I just thought that was a really interesting
and your
response.
Use and the way that you've digested that natural material and contextualizing it into an American flag.
Yeah.
And the things that you said of danger, or even lacy, a fragility, but also an elegance, and it's large and looming, and those can all apply to that subject.
Yeah.
So now you've done 4 iterations of the American flag, and your final, or not final, but your most recent one was displayed in Como, Italy. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. So the second one was at Ha.
Okay.
And it was a fragmented flag. The first one was a full flag. The second one at Ha, there were pieces on the floor. So it was fragmented in a certain way.
And Ha is the Ha Contemporary Gallery.
Ha Contemporary Gallery. And then the third flag was an iteration of that flag, which was at Mid-America Arts Alliance. And then just this year, I've had a chance to do this American flag in Como, Italy.
And it's a substantial piece, a substantial sculpture, 11 by 7.
Right.
And it's in another country.
Yes.
And there's a whole bunch of logistics that you as an artist had to figure out, and in terms of getting the work there, and then displaying it, and also recontextualizing the piece in another demographic, you know, in another country. And I'm curious how it was received, all of that.
Yeah.
Tell me about
Well, it was so interesting. First of all, it was definitely, for me, it was quite a stretch in terms of simply fabricating and installing the flag, because this flag was larger and it was free. It wasn't too much larger. It was about the same size actually as the one on the wall, but it was much denser and it was suspended, so the viewer could walk around it actually for the first time that I'd ever done. It was the first time I'd done anything like that.
Well, I love, you have photos of it, and there's a photo that EG took of you between the piece and you and the wall. So it's the thorns, it's your body, and it's the shadows, which I
Yes.
thought was so important because the shadows are an equally important piece to, or a part
of
of
it.
that
That's right.
piece. So
That's right.
there's a lot going on. And
There is. So this piece was really important for me in multiple ways. First of all, I would like to say a million thank yous to Studios Inc. for having the opportunity to have a space that would allow me to explore growing this flag in a way, suspending it in a way, conceiving of it in a way that is, I think, richer and denser than other works that I've done. So I'm extremely appreciative.
because you were able to have it up and installed in your
Yes, in my
studio for a
studio.
while and develop your thoughts
understand
and
it.
react to it. Yes.
Right, and that's how I figured out how to ship it and how to take it apart and how to put it together. So I'm extremely grateful to Studios Inc. in that regard. I'm also very grateful to Arts KC because I got an inspiration grant, which was very helpful in terms of excuse me, addressing the shipping, because shipping was complicated and in the largest part of the financials and things.
And expensive.
And expensive,
expensive.
right? And then I'm also very grateful for the opportunity to show this in Como in Italy, which was with Mini Art Textile / Arte e Arte. Arte e Arte is a cultural entity that is based in Como, Italy, and every year for the past 29 years, they have had, this will be the 30th year, they've had this exhibition called Mini Art Textile, and they, I think for quite a long time, I wouldn't say forever because I don't know, but the venue is in a former church in Como. So there are these side, I don't know if they're niches or I don't know what the term is.
Sometimes the nave.
But is the nave not at the front?
Yours is the nave.
It's on the side.
Or the two on the side, I think.
Well, this had like 5 or 6 on the side of these beautiful archways.
It could be little chapels too for specific families.
Well,
it depends on the church. I'm not sure.
And but anyway, and so there were like maybe 6 on each side or 5 on each side. So individual artists from around the world were invited to have a piece, like an installation in each of those. And then there was one enormous and fabulous piece at the very front of the church that was just astounding by a Japanese artist. And then there are individual sculptures that are smaller. They're maybe like, I don't know, 12 inches by 12 inches or 20 inches by 20 or something like that. And those are down the center, and there may be 40 of those or something.
So it was quite an honor for you to have
of the,
we'll call it a nave. Or
a
niche.
Okay, a niche. Let's call it a niche.
To have one of that, that's wonderful.
It was.
So did the experience breed a confidence in you to be able to now approach other opportunities that aren't in Kansas City?
Yes. And so let me say one other thing and
Sure.
then one other thing. Okay. So one of the great things when I made this flag in my studio at Studios Inc., I was able to have our great friend and photographer E.G. Schimpf photograph it. And that was extremely helpful on multiple fronts. First of all, E.G. and I worked with the lighting, and I was able to really understand what a big part shadow plays in this. It helps kind of flesh out the materiality of the thorn, but then also from a conceptual point of view, shadow is also a big part of the context, really, in a way. So that was really important, even in helping me understand the piece further, is working with the lighting and working with the photographs. And then the photographs were such a wonderful vehicle as I worked with the people in Como and the other entities as I sent out materials. That was so extremely helpful to have been able to put it in my space, to develop it in my space, and then photographs. And I am now. I have been sending out materials and trying to place it next fall during the election.
Yeah.
And I'm, it's like, it's kind of like water on a stone. You just kind of try and try and try and try and see what happens and see what happens. And it looks like there could be a possibility that would be, that might be working out. So I
really exciting.
You never know until you know, but things are looking
and we won't
better.
share what it is to
Right.
avoid the jinx.
Right.
But I do think that what you spoke about with EG is so important for emerging artists or young artists to understand, especially when you're working with large dynamic works, is quality photographs and sending those and communicating to curators and installers the intent, because for people who aren't able to come and see it in person.
Yeah.
And even with those photographs, the one that is one of my favorites of you between,
Yeah.
it doesn't show the whole piece, but it's a detail. And I usually talk to artists about the importance of, yes, show the big piece, but because most likely people are viewing it on a computer screen, which is at most 8
Right.
inches tall.
Right.
You need to have those photographs that really communicate and advocate for the piece and what the experience of that piece is. So
That's really
if
right.
you have a thick impasto painting, get in there and take a picture of the
Right.
detail of it. Or, if there's a really interesting moment, like with your bronze sculptures that are smaller tabletop pieces that rest on a almost like a glass pillow, that
Yeah.
if you get down eye level to that glass pillow, you can see the very tip
Yes.
point of that
Which is so
sculpture, and
nice.
it's such a surprise. And so unless you're able to walk that person through or they can see it in person, make sure you're sending pictures that
That's
showcase
really right.
and educate. And EG does a great job of that. I even like the pieces the photographs he takes with a person that's blurred or they're walking
yeah.
to show scale.
It shows
and
dimension.
because otherwise, if it's
And scale. Yeah, it's a big
having
deal.
that little datum point that communicates more information.
Yeah.
So great.
And the thing that you're mentioning about the that one image that you like, where there's the thorn, the person, me, and then the shadow, it really does so much about describing the space,
Right.
the space in between, which is hard sometimes for people to understand.
Well, and as an artist advocate too, Susan, it's also describes you.
Oh, yeah.
As a woman,
Yeah.
as a sculptor, and it communicates, and people are just as interested in the maker as the piece
probably
itself. And if they have the pleasure of ever getting to talk to you, then
Right.
then they can fall further in love with what you do. But I really appreciate this talk, because there's so many things that thread through your work, and this idea of movement and drawing and form,
Yeah.
a reaction to the natural world around you, and an elegance because you constrict yourself to materials.
Yeah.
Your burned drawings, it's just really the
Yeah.
evidence of your action.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
You're not
it's drawing
really,
the mark out of the paper. There's I'm not putting anything
it's
on it.
It's almost a shadow
Yeah.
of the
right.
movement. And I think that's brilliant, and how shadow comes back into play with what you do. And I just can't express how grateful I am that you're a Studios Inc. president. And I think that anybody that has the opportunity to come down and have a conversation with you in your studio should carry the same gratitude.
Well, thank you. I would love for anyone to come at any time. It's always
and
thrilling.
You have an exhibition coming up here this year, so stay tuned,
Yes.
everybody. We will share when Susan's exhibition opens. It's going to be impressive. It's going to be amazing.
Thank
And
you.
again, thank you, Susan, for your time.
Thank you, Courtney. It was great.
For more information on our resident artists, events, and exhibitions, please visit www.studiosinc.org. That's studiosinc.org. Thanks for listening. The music featured on our podcast is from artists Barry Anderson and Ricky Allman of Lucite Plains.